Welcome back. In this video we're going to continue on bringing in the Sprite Manager scripts and getting those set up. The next one that we need to work on in this video is actually going to be the Link Sprite Manager. Now there's two ways you can do it. We can do it the same way as before. We can come in here and we can create a new C# script and erase it all. Or we can also come into Visual Studio. Now that we've got a project all set up and synced, we can actually come into Scripts and hit Add New Item Scripts. Now, give it a second, it'll open up. In here, the way I'm going to do this is going to be a little bit different. I actually have templates that I've built for Unity. Now, if you've watched Jason Busby's videos on his simple 2D game, he goes through and describes the process of how you can make these. And they actually do save a lot of time when you're creating a lot of Unity scripts, and it's well worth watching those videos and learning how to do it and set this up on your own. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to name this file linkedspritemanager.cs, and I'm going to hit Add. And then this is just going to come in here. It's going to create my base class and get it all set up. But just like Sprite Manager, this code is not needed, and I can actually delete it because the code that we're going to use is actually over here in the next section of the wiki. And again, I'm going to copy all the code, including the comment section, to give Brady Wright credit. And we're going to come down here, and if you look, Link Sprite Manager is nothing more than an extension of the Sprite Manager, which means it inherits all the functionality of the original Sprite Manager, but then adds some more functionality on top of it. Now, what functionality does it add? Well, what it does is it provides a way to update the information based on the position of your object. What that means is the problem that you have is with Sprite Manager, if you were to create a sprite and set it all up and link it to a game object, say an empty game object that has its transform information, that sprite is going to draw at that position of that game object when you start running the game. But what happens if you move that game object? If you decide that that game object's position changes during the game and you're only using Sprite Manager, that sprite isn't going to move along with it. I will also be demonstrating that in a future video. But what will happen is the sprite will draw at the initial position of that object, and when you move that object, that sprite's still going to draw at that position. It's not going to move, but the game object may be moving all over the screen. You just won't ever see it. Now, what this linked Sprite Manager does is it goes through and it will update the position of the sprite to match the position of the game object of which it's attached. That is very, very handy and reduces a lot of overhead that you have to worry about going in and making sure that you're saving the references to the game objects and then transforming that sprite's position based on that game's object's transform. The downside of it is it can be very, very inefficient if you go, well, I've got all these objects and I don't want to have to deal with it, so I'm just going to attach everything to a Link Sprite Manager. But what happens if, let's say, for instance, you're working on a 2D side scroller and you have a whole bunch of these blocks that are all over your level that are making up all the platforms that you're jumping, but they stay in one place and they don't really move? Well, if you have the Link Sprite Manager used for all of them, it is looking and it's going to calculate and check those transforms to see if those objects moved every single frame. And if those objects aren't moving, you're wasting a lot of processor power by using the Link Sprite Manager. So in that case, you're much, much better off to use just the Sprite Manager because those objects aren't moving. Now, in our case, where we're going to have 5 basketballs moving and they're going to be moving every single frame, all the way up until they come to a rest at the very end, and I don't have to worry about some objects moving and some objects not moving. It's going to be advantageous for us to use the Link Sprite Manager, and that's what we're going to do. But when I get ready to do it, I'm actually going to show you what happens when you use the Sprite Manager as opposed to the Link Sprite Manager, and I'm going to show you how you can update the position using the Sprite Manager in case you're using that as opposed to the Link Sprite Manager. With that all being said, I've selected all of the text for the Link Sprite Manager, and I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to switch over to the Visual Studio, and I'm going to come make sure I'm on the Link Sprite Manager, come in here, and I'm going to paste all that code. And I'm going to save it, and I'm going to switch back over to Unity. Again, we still have the same error, and we're going to have that until after the end of the next video, because we haven't copied the sprite class over yet. And that is all I want to cover for this video. In the next video, we're going to bring in the last of the 3 scripts, which is going to be the sprite class, and we're going to get that in place, and these errors will go away. And then after that, we can actually start looking at getting some sprites moving on our screen. So until then, I'll see you guys next time.